Hello, and welcome to the penpixelprint show. A regular podcast featuring the trials and tribulations of a small group of writers in Scotland. We will meet them and follow them as they try to be heard whilst juggling the demands of necessity. Whether it is raising a family, feeding themselves, or making a living. Listen in as we discuss what works, what doesn't, typewriters and tonic, inspiration and exasperation, fonts and editors, rejections and reading, book launches and shipwrecks. I am your host, Moira Cormack, author of The Witch of Land and Sea, poet and all-round wise woman. In this first series, we will be meeting all the writers and finding out as much about them as we can. So here I am today in my writing room. With me is Stella Hervey Birrel. Her first novel is nearly a year old, 6 days off, I think. It's called How Many Wrongs Make a Mr. Right. She also writes a weekly blog called A Tiny Life 140. Stella is the lead singer of The Domestics alongside her husband. They both write songs for the band. They live in East Lothian with their 2 sons and 1 black cat. Hello, Stella. And welcome. It's so lovely to have you here today.
Thank you for having me, Moira.
I thought, having known you a while now, that there's quite a lot of things that are very, very interesting and unique about you. And I thought it would be absolutely lovely if we talked about them today and shared them with the listeners. So would you like to start by telling us about yourself?
Well, I am neither Scottish nor English. I'm not from these isles. My father was a refugee from Hungary, and he came over in 1956. And my mother's mother was a refugee from Russia. And I'm ashamed to say, I don't know what year they left, but apparently, according to family folklore, they left on the last boat that came out of Russia before the revolution.
So you left on a boat out of Russia. Yes. It even sounds magical because it seems more or less land-bound to me, but yes.
It's an interesting point.
It is. It's a very interesting point. Maybe they meant it kind of mystically.
Yes, a mysterious land boat.
A mysterious land boat, yes. Yes, that sounds great. Like one of those Philip Pullman balloons that sort of fly with a boat underneath them.
Oh yeah, that sounds great.
So you're cast from these amazing people who took this airboat out of Russia.
Yes, and then sort of clawed their way up from the immense poverty that you land in the UK with if you've come with nothing except what you could sew into your clothes. I was born in Scotland and brought up here. I lived in England for a little while, but I do feel Scottish, born but not bred, I always say.
And did these amazing grandparents, did you actually know them?
I knew my father's mother, but not very well, because she lived quite far south in Cambridge. And the rest of my grandparents, unfortunately, were all long gone.
By the time
I was around, yeah.
And so you grew up in Scotland, in Edinburgh itself?
In Fife, in a market town in Fife. So I was quite keen to get away from there.
Yes.
I think it was a lovely place to bring up children, and it was a difficult place to be a teenager.
And then also difficult to be a young woman trying to make your way in the world. So then where did you go from your village in Fife?
So I went to university in Manchester, and my father had passed on quite suddenly just before I went. And that was when things sort of started to unravel. I mean, I was on it felt like I was on a really obvious route, you know, school. I was a high achiever at school and then got a university place, and I was heading for a 2-1 or a first. I'd done a couple of semesters, everything was going fine. But presumably partly because my dad had died and there'd been lots of unresolved emotion there, I experienced a psychotic break and I ended up in a hospital in North Manchester, which was not the plan.
No, and that must have been completely and utterly frightening in and of itself, to be a young girl from a rural Fife village with ambitions that have driven you to go to a major metropolis like Manchester when your father has just died. You must have been very frightened.
Well, I think for the time that I was actually, I like to say, sort of out of it, you know, when you're truly, truly psychotic, I don't really remember being frightened, although I suppose for some of the time I was frightened. But for a lot of the time, I just wasn't really present. It feels like I wasn't really present for probably about 24 hours the first time and around a full week the second time. Because what happened was that I went back to my poor benighted mother, and I did a fancy verb. Oh, you'll like this. Intercalated.
Yeah.
Which means you start back at university where you stopped, but the next year. So I intercalated, went back to university in Manchester, lasted about a fortnight, and then had another psychotic break. And then I went to...
And that was a year in between, a whole year in between.
A whole year in between.
And in that year, had you gone and lived back with your mother?
Yes, but she had moved by then to the Lake District. So that was a whole new setup.
But she was closer physically to you then. The Lake District is closer to Manchester than Fife.
Yes, which was just as well because I believe that they had to come and find me because I'd got on a train and I was heading for London at one point. I think it was maybe Chester. So Mum had to get in the car and come and find me, and they were keeping me at the station. I mean, the people that looked after me, just wonderful. I wouldn't even know how to thank them.
Yes.
So yes, she came and rescued me.
That wonderful, wonderful life-affirming thing, the kindness of strangers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, I think it informs our everyday. People see us so much more clearly than we ever imagined that they do.
Yes. I remember saying to them, because I thought that they thought I was a terrorist or something, and I remember saying, do you want to look in my bag? Do you want to look in my bag? And they were like, no, it's fine. Just come and sit. It's fine. We don't need to look in your bag. It was really, yeah.
They saw you for exactly what you were and looked after you
She's
accordingly.
A bam
I don't think so.
In a nice way.
Yes. Well, I mean, that was a lot to deal with, wasn't it, in one go? Grief can affect us all quite differently. And if the grief had come at the same time as your family home was then broken down,
that's right,
you find it is very difficult, I think, to make a narrative out of that. And the younger anybody is, the harder it is to create a narrative.
And I think I didn't make time to grieve, and squishing down emotions, we all know as adults, is never a good idea. So, you know, you squish down the grief and the anger and the fear and that sense of being cut adrift, like you say, from that family home.
And of course, at that teenage time, when we are pushing ourselves out into the world, we don't want to look back. And then we find, as you did, that actually it had you by the ankles and there was no way of just escaping from all of this. It did have to be dealt with.
That's a really good way of putting it. Gosh, you should be a writer.
I think you're going to be in charge of your own story, Stella. More than. So there you were, a child of refugee immigrants and living in the Lake District with your mother. So after the second attempt at university, did you go back and live with your mother?
Yes. And I did get a degree because I was quite doggedly perseverant that I was not going to be the only person in my immediate family without at least an undergraduate degree. So I did Open University. So I lived at home, I did Open University, and I worked in a shop and a pub and various places I can't even remember now. That's terrible. And yeah, I got a 2-2 in English language and literature, I think, from the Open University.
And did you enjoy it?
Some of it.
Yes.
It depended. If I was doing lots of socialising, I was socialising more than I was studying, hence not getting a 2-1.
But I think in some ways that's a perfectly healthy thing to do. I don't think we all need 2-1s or firsts in degrees.
Good.
Life experience is as important as the degree itself. And so these things, being a refugee and your mental illness, have massively affected who you are as a person.
Yes, I think that would be fair to say. I think particularly the mental health thing. I mean, I think having refugees in my family history informs a lot of my political and social opinions. But the mental health thing is still a very present part of my personality. It's something I need to be vigilant about. I need to be careful. I medicate if I need to. I have undergone various different pieces of therapy and counselling when I felt that I could or I should. And I have a tiny life. I don't go out and try and do lots and lots of things. I don't stretch myself too thin. I don't go on committees because I can't. And I'm very aware of what I'm capable of.
But you do, and you do have, you might have a tiny life, but you also have an exceptionally creative life because you are involved in your band as well. And you write songs for your band and you play and you perform and you are one of the driving forces inside that band.
Yes, it's a funny thing because you're sort of like, oh yes, I'm very socially anxious and I also front a band. And I think people are like, sorry, what? But I'm afraid it is just something that I hold. It's two things that I am. I mean, I would apologise for it, but I can't be bothered. So yeah, I mean, it does take a push, but I do also like to go out and perform and, you know, applause is nice. I'm not going to lie.
I know, I've been to support you.
Oh, bless you, you have.
And enjoyed it every single time.
Aww. And it's a nice band. You know, my dear friend is in it and my husband's in it and there's some lovely guys in it who I also class as very close friends. So it's a very supportive group.
I wanted to ask you, Stella, about your family because we've touched on, you know, where you came from and where you lived and the mental illness as well, which I know you don't keep undercover either. You bring it out there because you do believe it is something that should not be a taboo, that we should be speaking of, and that there are small things we should do all the time to protect ourselves.
Absolutely. I mean, we spend so much time thinking about our physical health, talking about our physical health, looking after our physical health. And I just think mental health is exactly the same. It's exactly the same. If you're feeling down or if you're depressed and you're in a place where you don't feel you can get out of it, go to your GP and speak to them. And if they say, I think you should take an antidepressant for a couple of months, 6 months or whatever, then take it. If you had the flu, you would take paracetamol. If you broke your arm, you would put a cast on it. It's the same thing. I know it's a taboo. I know people really, really struggle with the idea of taking a tablet. But for me, I was on tablets for about 6 years and I couldn't drink at all right through my early 20s and I managed. It was okay.
Yes.
It was okay.
Yes. And you're here now, today with me. And we have had a lot of fun since we first met about 4 or 5 years ago. And we've been out and about and we've done all sorts of things together.
Yeah, you've dragged me to all sorts of things.
Yeah.
For our listeners, just for accuracy.
But can we go back and touch on your mum? Because your mum is also religious and I know that Well, you were talking about it earlier. Why don't you start and say the thing that you said to me about how you had thought you were walking along?
Oh, when I'm walking along. So I'll be walking along, and I'll think to myself, well, do you know, I don't think, Christianity doesn't seem very likely, does it? I mean, a creator God maybe, but I mean, the whole Son of God thing and the crucifixion and all the resurrection stuff, it just doesn't sound viable. And I don't think I really believe in that anymore. I don't think that I believe in Christianity, not really. And I'm not a fan of organised religion because of what that does to people. And I can walk along and I can think these thoughts. And there is a large part of my brain which is basically saying, I write, and just isn't remotely interested. And I just have no choice in the matter. It is such a deep part of my personality that it really doesn't matter how much I think about Christianity, how much I assess it as a viable option. It's part of who I am, and I don't get a choice in that one.
You cannot intellectualize it out of yourself.
But I mean, and I'm not a fundamentalist Christian, and I don't, I don't preach hate or any of that stuff. And I will look at the Bible as I would look at any text. So, but the other thing I don't get to choose, the faith thing I don't get to choose. That's my world religion. I'm stuck with it now.
Yes. And it must be quite comforting in a way to go through, as you're walking, to go through that whole feeling and then find yourself settled in a place. Mm-hmm. After all the other less settled variables, to find that this is settled somewhere inside your chest and will never be going.
Yes. And then it's nice to have, especially for somebody that's anxious, this concept. It was Mum who told me about this, about when you're really worried about something or you're really worried about someone, and you can hold on to that, and it can really, unbalance you. If you're really worried about a really good friend or a family member, and she said, you can hand that on. You can hand that on to somebody else and say, look, this is what's happening, and my friend's in trouble, and I would like you to be with her in some way, and you can hand that on. And I hesitate to say, you can hand that on to Jesus, because this is not an American podcast and it will not fly. But as a religious person, you can move things, emotions through yourself rather than having to hold on to everybody else's pain as well as your own. So.
Yes. So tell me about your mother.
My mother, bless her, she was one of the first women to be ordained in the Scottish Episcopal Church in 1994.
Oh, it just gives me a shiver hearing about it.
It was history, and I keep saying her story, and I keep saying to her, you need to write about this. She goes to a writers group now where she lives, and I keep saying, you must write about this, and she goes, so I might. I'm trying. I'll keep you posted. And I was there in 1994. I think they ordained about 20 women or something at that time. And I can remember being in the cathedral and being really surprised that at the end I burst into tears. And because I was 16, I didn't have a clue. But it was a very emotional occasion. And she had a hard time because a lot of people in our congregation were not at all happy about a woman handling holy things and all this stuff. And then there was a sort of flood of the market, as it were, in terms of personnel. So she moved south to get a paying job. And she did exceptionally well. She was a fantastic pastor, and she was also an amazing fundraiser, and she raised lots of money for new church buildings and community centres in some very deprived parts of the Lake District. And now she's retired, and she's living as an oblate, which is a sort of nun. It's like half a nun. And she lives on Unst, which is the UK's most northerly isle.
You are going to tell me, aren't you, that she has been inspirational to you?
Yes, I think so. I mean, she's a funny lady, bless her. She's very English. She's very reserved with us. I don't think she is with her real friends, but with her children, she remains quite reserved. So it's more that I will look at her story and be inspired rather than I would go to her to be inspired, if you see what I mean.
Yes. But for us listening, what you've just said about her sounds massively inspirational.
Yeah.
I mean,
She has the strength of 10 men.
yes. I mean, she definitely is somebody who put her head above the parapet to say, I am going to be one of the first women to be ordained.
But she would say that she didn't make that choice because she feels deeply that she was given a call and that God asked her to go and do this thing, which she desperately did not want to do at the time, but in the end accepted that that was her path.
Yes, but some of us deny our path. Some of us might have been called in 1940 or 1876, and there was no chance of it, and it would have seemed so remote to be impossible. However, for your mother, it was possible, and she was at the right place at the right time, and she didn't hesitate. She stepped in and up. So she did it with the odds stacked against her, didn't she?
Yeah, she raised 5 girls and about 20 dogs, I would imagine, in all. And we lived in a massive, messy house. And then off she went and did all her courses and became a deacon and then a priest.
And what about all your siblings?
So I'm the youngest of 5. Can't you tell? I always say it when people ask me. So I am spoilt and whiny. And my mum always said, yeah, when we worked out you were spoilt, it was a little bit late because we'd already spoilt you. I was like, thanks, Mum. That's really supportive. Thank you. But yeah, I am coddled and babied to this day by my lovely sisters. We all chat on Facebook. They all live quite far away. They're all down south in England, Englandshire, as we like to call it. But they're very supportive of my work. They're amazing cheerleaders. They're extremely supportive. We're very supportive as parents to each other, even though we all have very different children and very different parenting styles. So I am very lucky to have my lovely sisters.
It sounds like something out of Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah, with a bit more mobility.
Yes, with a bit more mobility. But, 5 girls. I have 4 daughters and, yes, 4 is enough for me.
Well, 2's enough for me, yeah.
Yes.
No idea what. I think they wanted to have 6 originally. But
they settled at 5, yes.
Yeah, it was the 70s. It was all, let's have 1 million children and live in Fife. That was the dream.
You've said that when you've written a book, they all go through it. You give it to all of them. So did you do that with How Many Wrongs?
I think I gave it to a few of them and then the rest found out and were really annoyed that why hasn't I've not read it, why has such and such read it, and it all became a bit of an issue and I had to make sure that everybody had a copy and but that was mostly forgetfulness, to be honest. But yes, I think they all read it before it came out officially.
And did they all edit it and give you feedback on it? Or
No.
did they decide that was... How close is that bond, Stella? What can they say or what can't they say?
Well, I think it's more about like how much time they have or how much time they make. I mean, one of my sisters really went through it with a fine tooth comb, which was really kind of her because I don't think she had time to do it, but she made time. And then, another sister read it and was like, oh, I really enjoyed it, thank you. And that was fine too because we're all busy, and when some of the sisters read it, it was pretty much ready and I wouldn't have edited it much more anyway. So yeah, and then with short pieces, again, it depends who's around. And we're all at it now because my eldest sister has been doing a bit of blogging and stuff. She's an academic, but she's very involved in sort of Europe and stuff. So she's been blogging about, the Brexit stuff. So she'll come on Facebook and be like, oh, could somebody have a look at a piece that I'm doing? I'm like, excuse me, I'm the only person that says that. So yeah, you have to get in fast these days.
Yes. So your writing and your inspiration and your creativity has reached out to other family members, to your mother and your sisters.
Yeah, and my other sister has started a blog about her transgender daughter, which I think is fantastic because it's such an important subject and she writes really well about it as well, very sort of realistically about what it's actually like. And yeah, my mum's really enjoying her writing group. As if I seem to have opened it up to everybody.
So now that 2 Wrongs is out, what's your next project? What are you working on now?
I'm writing my second novel. I feel like I've been writing it forever. That's probably because I have.
How long have you been writing it for?
Oh, was it not? Did I not have a whole draft before How Many Wrongs came out? Because
I think you
that
did.
Was, yeah, so that was
over a year ago. I thought you
Um,
thought you'd finished it, and I actually thought you'd started on your third novel.
I have started on my third novel, and then I went back to my second one.
And is the third novel just sort of sitting now?
It's at 75,000 words.
Oh, it's a big novel then.
Yeah.
You've done a lot.
Yes, but I'm not. Yeah, let's not talk about that now.
And so tell us about The Perfects then.
The Perfects is my second novel, and it is an excellent concept for a novel. And I'm not just saying that because I have a big head. I'm saying that because a professional editor told me, so it must be true. And it's about a woman who lives in a market town, and she has 3 boys, and they are 3, 6 and 11. And they are perfect. They are amazing at music. They are sporty. They are intelligent. And everybody in the market town where they live hates them. and they hate the mum because how has she got these perfect children and everybody else's children are misbehave all the time. And then things start to change and nobody can quite work out why. And it's about the secret that sits in the middle of that house.
Why are you changing it so massively?
Well, I had a big flashback in it. And you know, I said a professional editor said it was a good concept. So what happened was I was on Facebook whining, I think, which is what I normally do. And it was on one of these book groups. You're on some of them as well, aren't you?
Yes.
So I'd asked a question about my draft and lots of people had very kindly responded. It was about whether to have it in present tense or past tense. And lots of people had responded, including this editor. And then she offered to look at my synopsis for free, which was, like you say, the kindness of strangers again.
It is, and it makes such a big difference.
A huge difference. A huge difference. So she had a look at it and she picked up the word flashback. She said, you need to take that out because it indicates to a potential literary agent that you've lost the forward motion of the story. And I sort of went back to her and went, well, and she said, oh, it's probably just a few paragraphs here and there. And I said, well, it's actually 10,000 words. So it was 10,000 words. So I took them all out, which was a bit of a scary thing to do. But it was the right thing to do.
It is a very scary thing to do. I mean, I ditched the whole of the end of The Witch of Land and Sea when I was writing it the first time and rewrote it. I did. I had some wonderful advice. And it was, there are always more words.
Yeah, it's true. Because I'm writing. I wrote a new chapter. Yes, the second half of a new chapter yesterday. I was like, oh, look at that. The sky has not fallen.
The sky has not fallen. No, we do not have to go and see the king and tell him that the sky has fallen. In that last statement, Stella, you mentioned that you wanted your synopsis and the novel to appeal to a literary agent.
That's right.
Can you tell me why you feel that's so important?
Well, I think at the moment publishing, I mean, everyone talks about this publishing revolution, and I think that's true. And if you went on one of these book groups that I was talking about on Facebook, and you basically put up a post which said traditional publishing, which is publishing through a literary agent and a traditional publishing house, or self-publishing, which is hiring an editor and publishing yourself, probably via Amazon, you would have 50% of the people saying, self-publishing, absolutely, it's the way to go. You're 100% in control. You can do your own marketing and you keep all your profits. And you'd have 50% of people saying, traditional publishing, that's the only way to go. You know, you get the best advice and you have a much bigger reach because you have the potential to get in with the big six. And there's this whole thing about the big six. And I think at the moment, I have absolutely no problem with self-publishing. There are some fantastic self-published books out there and some great writers. But I just feel that for me at the moment, I require the validation of a literary agent. And that's what I'm aiming for just now. Which is not to say that's what I'm going to end up with, because it's harder than it seems.
Well, it of course, it's become harder too, hasn't it? Because as the market has broken down and diversified, the traditional publishers, the big ones, have closed ranks much more tightly. So they're really not accepting the same number of new writers that they were. What about a sort of medium-sized publisher with a literary agent? Would that give you the validation that you're looking for?
Yeah, one of a really great indie publisher, like Sandstone or something like that would be. If you're listening, Sandstone.
Yes. That would give you the validation that you're looking for.
I think so. I'm just sort of ready to take the next step sort of along my writing journey, and that's the direction that I'm hoping to go in just now.
Stella, what is your writing routine? Do you have a routine?
Ish. I'm at home with the children, so I get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and I write till 7, and then I get the children ready for school, if they're going to school, which increasingly they don't appear to be. They appear to be on holiday again.
Yes.
So I take them to school, and then if I manage not to bring anybody back for a cup of coffee from the playground, then I'll write until lunchtime and have lunch, and then I might go for a walk. But it's very unlikely that I will write for the whole of the school day.
I think that sounds plenty. I think that sounds like a very solid routine there. And do you plan, or do you go with the flow?
I'm a planner.
You're a planner.
When we were talking about this earlier, I said to Moira, I only go with the flow when you make me.
Margaret Atwood described people who don't go with the flow as a kitten playing with a ball of wool. And the kitten would bat the ball of wool all over the room, and that's how the story would go.
I like to know where I'm going.
You do like to know.
I like to draw a map.
And who do you think has inspired you most?
I think I sort of get inspiration from lots of different places and lots of different people. And even just like something will happen or somebody will tell you a story and you suddenly want to write down what they just said because you think, oh, that would work for a short story, or that would work for my novel, or that character, or they could have that turn of phrase or something.
And what about your music playlist? Because as a musician, it would be quite nice to know what are the key songs that you go to. Do you have a playlist playing as you write?
Yeah, no. At the moment I'm listening to the Moana soundtrack because my children are currently obsessed with the latest Disney film, and I made the mistake of buying the CD. It's actually, I quite like it actually. So yeah, we listen to Moana and we listen to Capital FM because they like pop music, and I very rarely get to listen to any cool music like I should be listening to.
Well, thank you, Stella, so much. It's so sad, but we've come to the end of our chat on this edition of the Pen Pixel Print Show. My special thanks to Stella for coming in and sharing so generously. You can contact Stella on Facebook as Stella Hervey Birrel and Twitter as @ATinyLife140. If you enjoyed the show, please tell your friends, review it,
3,
or follow us on Twitter @penpixelprint show.
2,
Thank you for listening. Look forward to the next time.
1.